But anyway, back to our study in Luke chapter 9. We're going to be looking at the very end of the chapter, where 3 people come up to Jesus, and 2 of them want to follow Jesus and ask him if they can't go along. And then Jesus, a third one, Jesus asked him to follow him. And they have these weird responses. And Jesus kind of cuts them down, each one, for their responses, for the way they respond to this invitation to follow him. So we're going to look at that. And it all has to do with this area of how we get started in a ministry. That's what we're going to relate this to today. Is we know we need to be in the Word, we know we need to pray, but this whole realm of how do I have a ministry, and where do I get started, and what's it all about? Is it scary? Does it mean getting up in front of people? You know, we all have these connotations that are a little bit fearful for a lot of us, that ministry is kind of this weird thing. But we're going to hopefully settle that today and hopefully put your mind at ease as to what ministry actually is. So where should you start your ministry? And the first thing I would suggest is your ministry starts with your family. Your family, of all people. And I get that from verses. I'm going to start at the end and go backwards here. We're going to start with verses 61 and 62. It says, "And another also said to Jesus, 'I will follow you, Lord, but first permit me to say goodbye to those at home.' But Jesus said to him, 'No one after putting his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of God.'" So this guy says, "Yeah, I'll follow you, Jesus, no problem. But first, I need to go home and say goodbye to my family." And Jesus says, "What? You don't get it. Because your family is part of your ministry. So you don't go home and say goodbye to your family. No one who takes the plow and looks back is worthy of the kingdom," he says. In other words, you got the wrong idea here. So our family is actually where our ministry begins. Those relationships that we have. You say, well, how do we do that? How do husbands, and those of you who are husbands, we have a ministry with our wives. It says so in Ephesians chapter 5. And let's see, it's way down here in verse 25. It says, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of the water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and blameless." So husbands ought also to love their own wives as their own bodies. So part of our ministry, husbands, is to love our wives and to encourage our wives and to be a support for our wives. Say good things to our wives. One of the things is to love our wives. And it doesn't hurt to tell them that. I think sometimes as husbands we have the idea that, I told you I loved you 5 years ago, and if that ever changes, I'll let you know. But that's not the way it works. In fact, just the other day, I told my wife, I said, "You are a beautiful woman." And I just thought she knew that, and you look at her, and everyone understands that she's a beautiful woman. But she says, "You need to keep telling me that." And so, I need to do that. It's part of our ministries. They need to hear this day after day, and year after year. We never get tired of these things. And so that's part of our ministry. And then wives, you have a ministry to your husband. And we read about that in 1 Peter 3. And it says, "In the same way, you wives be submissive to your own husbands, so that even if any of them are disobedient to the word, they may be won without a word by the behavior of their wives, as they observe your chaste and respectful behavior. And let not your adornment be merely external, braiding of the hair and wearing gold jewelry or putting on dresses, but let it be the hidden person of the heart, with the imperishable quality of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is precious in the sight of God. Now, that's saying a whole lot of things, but one thing it's saying is that wives, the success of your husband, the well-being of your husband is kind of tied up in you. It's tied up in the way that you relate to your husband. And it can go both ways. You know, if you're tearing him down and not supporting him, then it's probably not going to go well with him. But if you're behind him and encourage him, then things can go well. In fact, somebody once said, behind every good man, every successful man, is a surprised woman. But that was a joke. Really, it's a supportive woman. And so part of your ministry, wives, is to your husband. And then parents, we have a ministry with our children. And it says so in Ephesians chapter 6. It says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. So part of our ministry as parents is with our children, and to make sure that we bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, as the thundering diction of the King James Version says. And what that means is not just teaching them, but also disciplining them. When things aren't right, to confront them and show them the right way, and to teach them in the things of the Lord. And one of the tools that I believe every parent should have in their arsenal is a Bible story book. And there's many of them on the market. But to bring them up in the Word, if we just read the Bible to our kids, some of the versions of the Bible are more on an adult level. And for little kids, they just lose interest. And so, in fact, one fella was reading the King James Version to his kids. And they just weren't getting it. They were just falling asleep. They were bored stiff. And so he took the time to write out a version of the Bible that was in their own language, that his little kids could understand. And we now know that as the Living Bible. Maybe you've seen a copy of the Living Bible. I would encourage you to get a version of the Bible that you can understand, as well as your kids. And maybe the Living Bible, I know that's where I started when I was in high school. I started reading that Living Bible because it made sense to me. I could understand it. It was in my language. Even though it was built for little kids, it was something I could relate to. So we've always got a Bible storybook for our kids. I remember the first time we brought one home, and we introduced it to our oldest son, John. He was just a little kid at the time. And started thumbing through the pages, and he was looking at the pictures. And he'd see this picture and that picture, and then we'd go on to the next one. We were just kind of flipping through the book, and all of a sudden he said, no, wait, go back. What was that? And it was a picture of Jesus hanging on the cross. And he had never seen that before. And he had all kinds of questions about this man that was being killed and that was dying there, and why was he there, and all that. And so this is a tool that we can use with our children. It's part of our ministry as families, as parents. And grandparents too. We can have a ministry with our grandchildren, and we still have a ministry with our children. So I think sometimes we get the idea that, you know, our family's here, and then, well, if we have extra time, we have our ministry out here. And we do all the stuff that families do, but that's not ministry at all. And that ministry is something else. But Jesus said, no, that's not true. He said, your ministry starts with your family. Well, what else is involved with ministry? And the second thing I would say is that you minister through your responsibilities. And we see that in verses 59 and 60. It says, and he said to another, follow me. But he said, permit me first to go and bury my father. But Jesus said to him, allow the dead to bury their own dead. But as for you, go and proclaim everywhere the kingdom of God. So here